especially after a game like that, I found it a little bit interesting that this is what was on his mind, right? Like, and by the way, nobody can understand media scrutiny probably as an American coach more than maybe Bob Bradley and myself, okay? And you better have thick skin and you better be ready to take criticism. And by the way, I don't think we've been critical at all.
It's the morning after, the night before. March Madness? Oh, this was almost March Sadness. The United States men got out of jail free last night. Needed a goal in the 96th minute. An own goal to force a second-string Jamaica 11 into extra time, where two moments of Gio Reyna and Hadji Wright combining to redemption song the Jamaicans earned us a place in Sunday night's Nations League final. You know, there's winning, there's ugly winning. And last night, I think we learned there's also sad winning. Victory, which left the fan base with the unshakable awareness that we'd all just stared into the darkness of the abyss and heard it swallow our screams. The good news, the three-peat, the Nations League three-peat is still on. In the words of the late great Jim Valvano, survive and advance. Sunday's final against Mexico now looms via thievery at levels known only to Shohei Ohtani's translator. We're going to break it all down, and I'm delighted to do so with someone who knows the programme, the players so very well. He's a former United States international himself and a US men's national team assistant coach who went on to gain European pedigree, host of the Call It What You Want podcast, available wherever you get your podcast. He was in Dallas last night to cover the game for Paramount Plus, where we'll be back for Sunday night's 9:15pm Eastern Time final. I'll actually be live on Men in Blazers YouTube after that game with the great Brendan Hunt. But for now, it's a joy to welcome back the last man to beat Jurgen Klopp at Anfield. My friend, the pride of Racine, Wisconsin. It's Mr. Jesse Marsch.
What's up, Roger? You had to take a dig at Liverpool there, huh? That doesn't seem right.
I was singing your praises. I'm objective and neutral.
That's the Everton in you. Do not lie. Don't try to make this about me. This is about you. But yeah. Great introduction. This I always love your poetic ways of describing things. So
we're going to do 5 minutes on the US and then 95 minutes talking about how you beat Liverpool. That's what we're going to do today. But Jesse, the smoke's cleared after the final whistle of United States 3, Jamaica 1. You're a coach. I'm fascinated. Off the top, how would you feel when that final whistle went? Honestly, in your heart, if you're on the coaching sideline, would you feel relieved that you dodged a bullet, a humiliation-filled bullet? Would you be somewhat terrified, shocked that with all of this talent against a Jamaican second 11, we'd come so close to disaster? Or would you be proud that your team dug deep, found a way to find a way? I'm asking honestly, because all coaches say the last one publicly. They say, I'm proud, we found a way, we dug deep. But inside, what would you really feel inside that may never be spoken publicly?
Well, I think it's a combination of all the things. You know, obviously you would have concern because the game, you prepare, think of being the national team. You prepare months for these two matches, right? And you're excited and you're ready to get your team together, and then it gets started and boom, you get punched in the mouth, and then the performance isn't quite what you would have hoped and what you would have talked about before the match and how you would have prepared. But in the end, the game is still about now you against the opponent, and how in the end do you use everything at your disposal versus everything the opponent has, and how do you put something together so that on the day you can emerge as the victorious one. And so I think that in the end they have to look at the positives, but they have to also be very aware of the things that need to improve.
We will talk about both of those elements, but first let's go back in time to the beginning of the game. I actually broadcast our game preview with Vamos host Hercules Gomez, and Herc said, and I agree, he said this squad, it's the best American men's squad, individual for individual, that we've ever been able to draw upon. Just the depth, the skill, the talent at our disposal. And I had Heimir Hallgrímsson, the Jamaican coach, the Icelandic dentist. Also, my mate, I love that man. He was on yesterday.
I know Heimir too. He's a good guy, really good guy.
He's an amazing guy, a ferociously joyous wonder. And he talked honestly on yesterday's podcast about how depleted Jamaica was due to suspension, injuries, disciplinary, self-inflicted wounds. So 30 seconds in, when Gregory Lee, League One, Oxford United Gregory Lee, rose up to head home, the entire backline seemed to turn off a Jamaican throw-in. When you watch that tape, that moment, I mean, real problems across the entire back five. Anthony Robinson switching off, Joe Scally losing his man, Matt Turner, his decision-making, I don't think he'll feel great. But as a coach reviewing that moment, who do you pinpoint blame on?
Well, I try not to pinpoint blame in general as the coach. I try to now look at scenarios and how the team can use, or individual players can use moments to learn and understand how to handle things better. In all set play situations, the biggest key is that there's defensively, first of all, a structure, but then a real ability to organize as a team and look around and make sure that things are accounted for. It was a simple, I mean, listen, Heimir is known for defensive structure and being good on set pieces, right? And that's almost exactly what that performance that Jamaica had was. It was almost, for Heimir, almost in his world of his vision of football, a perfect performance with it, with 1 second to be accounted for. And so, it was a simple double movement. They don't do well enough to deal with the cross. And then, for me, Joe Scally, obviously, when a guy loses a man, he's always going to take the heat. But for me, when you have a double movement like that, what if Cordova Reed winds up cutting the ball back to the penalty spot and he stays with the back post, and then that man scores, then everyone goes, well, Joe Scally lost his man. But it was a designed movement. It was a designed movement from the throw-in, and then it was a designed movement on the back post. And so it put Scally, I think the best thing for him to do would have been either to organize Timothy Weah to join in, to help deal a little bit, to come a little bit deeper, to deal with the numbers, or to make sure that Miles Robinson was aware that he had two players on the back post and that Miles could have been ready to deal with one of them. Because in the end, Joe had two things to deal with, didn't do well to deal with either, but then Miles didn't have anything, and Timothy Weah was just kind of standing at the top of the box. So you would talk about like trying to organize things ahead of time and make sure that we're communicating on what's happening with the opponent so that whatever they try to do, you're ready to deal with it.
That old sporting aphorism, everyone has a plan until they get scored on by Jamaica after 30 seconds. And we always say in those moments, conceding that early goal, that you learn a lot about a team by how they respond, how they react. And to me, it seemed rushed, frenzied, unsyncopated, shorn of coherent tactical ideas. What did you see, Jesse, for much of that game until the 95th minute?
Yeah, I've coached games where, you give up a goal in the first phases of the match. And then it's really making sure that, football is a long match, right? You have a lot of time to make up for a lot of things that happen. And like we saw, but the key is that, when you get an early lead or when you go down early, that you have an ability to stay focused on exactly what you're trying to achieve. I would have guessed that Jamaica coming out with a 5-4-1 would have caught them a little bit by surprise, because Jamaica's almost always played with a 4-4-2. But it really doesn't put that much change on what the tactical with the ball emphasis was for the match plan anyways. There's a little bit more that you have to deal with one more player on the back line. But what I saw, okay, and I don't want to be overly critical, but what I saw is that there's a lot of complex rotations and ideas of what Greg Berhalter wants to do with his team in possession. And what was a little bit clear on especially in the first half for me was that the connection and the discipline to stay in that structure and understand how the movements simply should be executed kind of fell apart, and turned into a little bit of a mess. And then you started seeing kind of players freestyling and running all over the pitch and trying things. You see Timothy Way on the left. You see Weston McKennie on the back line trying long balls. You see players running all over the place. And then you kind of lose the overall structure of what the coach wanted. The thing for me with tactics is always about making complicated things simple, right? That is what you're trying to achieve when you're trying to create a tactical system. And so last night showed a little bit that we're not fully there yet. And I heard that Berhalter referenced that it's been a few months, and so they need to kind of continue to make little reminders to bring everything back together, which to me makes sense. So hopefully against Mexico it looks a little more concrete and a little bit more together.
I want to talk about all of this, but essentially at the core of it, if I understand what you're saying, is that we are making international play far too complex, and when that doesn't work, and you sense his freestyling kicks in. And I do want to understand a little deeper, because we do have so much individual talent. Christian Pulisic has been in the form of his career at Milan. I think it's 9 goals on the season. Weston so admirably rejuvenated himself at Juventus. I could go on and on looking at that squad, talent for talent. We have so many strikers scoring goals for their club size. We'll discuss that in one moment. But what happened? I mean, let's pick Christian Pulisic, for instance. In these moments with the US team, he almost tries too hard to do it all by himself, to force it, to lift that team up, put it on his back in a really frenzied style. I mean, what do you see when you watch him in a US jersey?
Yeah, I think that kind of effort and mentality is perfect. Right? Is perfect. You want your best players feeling like this is my team and it's my responsibility to really help make this right if it's not going the way we want it. But within there are, and you want to give players the ability to have freedom to go and play and be themselves. But again, I think the more complex the structure you make, then if anyone decides to try to do something a little bit outside of what the structure is, it leaves everyone else going, okay, then what's my responsibility? And then where do I go? And then how do I play? And the one that I was watching a lot was Malik Tillman, because I thought that as he was in the middle and things were happening around him, and he's used to being at PSV where the structure is similar, the tactics are similar, right? But the discipline to kind of stay in your spot and then know when you catch the ball here, your options A are this, your option B is this, and then how to process through that quickly. If now guys start running all over and everything feels too complicated, then everybody feels a little bit like they're on their own island, and then they're not sure how it all fits together. And this is me looking at it from as a coach and also from a player. Like when you're on the pitch, the last thing you want to feel like is like, okay, what are we doing now? Where do I go now? Where do I get the ball? How do I get the ball? And so, I think even there were it looked like there was an attempt at halftime to simplify a couple things and a couple movements. Bringing Gio on the pitch, I think, then put someone in and around the back line that was able to slip some last balls, which obviously he had an incredible performance. I thought Tyler Adams coming in and just playing in the 6th spot, right, creating like an anchor that was disciplined to play his role, was really good. I thought almost every guy that came in off the bench did a good job. So it was better to see that as the game went on, it got more organized.
We have to credit this Jamaican side. Again, woefully short-handed. Honestly, reeling before kick-off. Their biggest stars, Aston Villa's Leon Bailey, West Ham's Mikel Antonio, Brentford's Ethan Pinnock were either injured, suspended, or kind of self-immolated. Bailey actually attempted to burn down the entire programme, just lobbed the grenade, just kicked the entire programme and the manager to a large degree in the down belows, which must have been morale sapping for the players that were there. But the Jamaicans retreated into a low block with a ferocious collective spirit. We couldn't dent it. Can you help us with this simple question? How much of the dire spectacle was that Jamaica were good, and how much of it was that we were just bad?
I think it's both, right? I mean, the game never exists in isolation. It's always dependent on what the opponent's doing. Jamaica, I know Hamir. I've watched his teams. I've talked to him about football. This was always when he came to visit me in New York one time. And he came to one of our video sessions with his staff, and we talked a lot about our pressing tactics. And
At the Red Bulls.
Yeah, at the New York Red Bulls. And so, this was a big part of the conversation. And he was saying, that with his Iceland team, he wanted to try to be a little bit more aggressive and see how to be more structured with that idea of how to be more aggressive. And that's the reason that he was coming to visit us. But he certainly is really good at creating discipline in his team. I mean, even the situation with Leon Bailey, it doesn't exist in isolation from what he's trying to achieve with the team, both tactically, mentally, everything. And by the way, I think Jamaica always has had good team spirit, pretty good talent on their team, good athleticism. But the thing that was always a question is over 90 minutes, could they be disciplined enough to stick to a plan of what they wanted to achieve? And what I think you can say about last night is maybe now they found a coach that can help build that. And I think the players for sure have to feel a sense of confidence in what they were able to achieve, because even though the U.S. got that last minute goal, they didn't give much away. So I think as we're evaluating what we thought happened with the U.S. team, I think we should definitely include a lot of the good things that the Jamaican team did.
Hamir has got that Jamaican team focusing for 95 minutes now, but thankfully no longer. Can we talk about Flo Balogun quickly for a moment? We coveted his arrival last year. When he chose to ride with us, it felt magnificent. He struggled at Monaco this season. He looked lost for much of last night. Has done often in a US jersey since Greg Berhalter returned. What do you think he needs tactically to set him up to succeed in a US jersey?
I think personally, watching Monaco as well, and I've been to a couple matches in the stadium, I think Florian is good at being in build-up play and coming underneath and creating combinations. But I think he's best at moving off the back line and running in the box and being a last play to use his speed and pace to test the opponent. And I feel like a lot of times what we're asking of him, and listen, when you're playing against a deep opponent, that's the difficulty, is how do you combine with the team? How do you find your moments? Because in many moments it was like him against three defenders, which obviously is not an easy thing to do. But I would prefer, whether it's with Monaco or with the national team, I like when he's looking to play off the shoulders of defenders, make slashing runs to get in behind, ready to run in the box to put himself in dangerous spots, and then finding ways to score more goals. I think I like him as that kind of striker. And on the day, it wasn't so easy for him, like I said, because it was often 1 against 3. It wasn't so easy for him to find those spaces. But you did see that then once we put Haji Wright up front, right, and we almost played with 2 strikers with him and Pepe at the end, that giving another guy to run off the back line. And I don't think that Haji Wright came underneath one time when he played as the striker. He only sat off the back line and looked to run in behind. And one of the things for me is, if you're Gio Reyna, you need someone who wants to do that, and you need a striker who's looking to get in behind. And if you're Haji Wright, then you need Gio Reyna, a player that can slip those balls, and then the combination of how the two can work together can be effective. And that's what
I love it. And by the way, credit to Pepe, also did a lot of running last night that created a diversion, that created a lot of space for Haji. But we couldn't score for much of this game. At the very time, we have an abundance of hot hand informed strikers. Josh Sargent cruelly out with a knock. Ricardo Pepe, who I just adore humanly, his tenacity. Haji Wright, of whom we'll speak in a moment. Brandon Vasquez scoring for fun in Liga MX. Jordan Pifok too, doing the business in the Bundesliga. How do you handicap them? Jesse, who are our 3 best strikers right now in order?
We talked about this on the podcast, and I think in the moment it would go Balogun, Pepe, Sargent. But
Is that third, second, first, or first, second,
first,
third?
second, third. Okay. But given the type of opponent, given what certain games require, given who's in form, like Sargent's emerged into that group for me because he's been in such great form. And maybe if we would have talked about this 4 months ago, Sargent wouldn't have been on the radar. He was injured. He hadn't scored as many goals for Norwich. So, it can change for sure. But in general, and then from a talent perspective, they're all at a high level. And so, and they all play in good leagues and they all play for good teams. And when they're hot hand, especially as a striker, then you need to really think about which guys to use, because this is what it is being an attacking player, or specifically a striker.
Horses for courses. Into the 90th minute with all this firepower, 0 goals. I think it was like ultimately 70% US possession. Got to say, Andre Blake barely had a hard save to make in regulation.
Yeah.
What's coaching and what's on the players?
Jeez. I'm not there every day to understand exactly what that would be. But, people are always critical of, they'll say things like, this coach isn't good at breaking down a low block, and guess what? The reason why teams play with a low block is because it's difficult to break down, and of course, all of us coaches, you have tactical ideas and you have little connections and you try to create some sort of movements and ideas of how to unbalance the opponent when you're in this phase of the game. For me, a lot of it is, okay, you have to have tactics with the ball about how to move and how to penetrate and then how to get into the box and what kind of movements you want once you get into the box. But then for me, you also have to have a real emphasis on how you lock the opponent into their own box, into their own final third, defensive third, so that you're good with counter-pressing, you're good with press defense, and you're pinning them back and you're not letting them out. And those details wind up often determining the overall momentum of what you can build. And then you have more corner kicks, and then you have more free kicks, and then you create some penalty situations. And ultimately, toward the end of the game, that's what the U.S. did. And the corner kick, I said on the broadcast last night that the feeling was if they were going to get a goal, it was going to come from a set piece, maybe a penalty situation or a corner kick. And that's what wound up happening.
If the US got a penalty, I'd love them to sub in a listener to take it. But question from a GFOP at Jesse D52. Why does this United States team struggle so much against a low block, and what should they be doing to beat it?
Well, again, every team does, right? But I think some simple ideas and some simple movements, and what happens a lot with a low block is you're building on one side. Let's say you're on the left and you're creating some sort of rotation that will often involve a central midfielder, maybe a striker or a winger, and then a fullback, and then some sort of rotation to try to get to the end line, and then maybe get a cross or a movement. And then if the opponent starts to shift over too much to that side, how quickly can you move the ball from the left side into the middle, and then having options that are happening with different movements in the middle, and then obviously some options that are happening on the opposite side to see if you can catch the opponent with an overload on the opposite side that can then lead you back to goal. This is even, if you go through what Pep Guardiola is, this is what his whole tactic is like going from right to left and then beating you on the right again. So you try to build those little things in. But then for me as well, when you're making a lot of these little passes and little combinations and trying to make little penetrating plays, there's also the idea that if you lose it, you can counter press for me right away to get the ball back. And for me, with a low block, this is as effective as the possession tactics are the recovery of the ball tactics, because the opponent gets relaxed for a moment. And if you're able to win the ball and then put something together to penetrate quickly again, then you can create moments that way. And then obviously set pieces. So, but again, it requires real tactical clarity on making sure that you're pinning the opponent into that space along with some of your possession ideas.
So when you watch, I mean, we love how young this team is. One of the nicknames that our listeners have come up with, the Gen Zeagles, kind of captures it up. But it was magnificent to watch Tyler Adams make his return after, what was it, 472 agonising days away from the United States team. 2 serious hamstring procedures. He's had a child in this time, become a father. There's
Jackson.
no doubt he is the leader vocally on this team. Watching him last night from the moment he came on. But apart from him, who are the leaders you see stepping up? Or is that still a work in progress?
Yeah, that's still a work in progress for me. Tim Ream has shown those qualities for sure.
Very much.
And maybe not having him on the pitch. But I think Greg's decision to not have him on the pitch was that he knew that that their main tactic was going to be going out on the counter and using their pace. And so for me, that as good as Tim Ream is and has been, I think that in general, that was probably a good decision. And maybe we'll see Tim against Mexico. And certainly I think Tim's had some performances in the Premier League this year that have been absolutely outstanding. And he shows his quality and experience and intelligence and leadership, right? So, but now you take out, and listen, I think Christian is a real leader too, and someone that the team looks to. Yeah. But it's also not so easy when you're an attacking player, other than making attacking plays, to be the absolute leader of the team. I mean, if you go around the world, and even when you talk about whether it's been Ronaldo or Messi or Mbappe or whatever, these aren't guys that are like really vocally telling everybody where to go and what to do. It's just their ability to make plays really galvanizes the team together. And then when they have moments as a team before the match or in the dressing room or whatever, they have a good way of saying, come on, like we're together, we're ready to go. So I always think for attacking players, it's not so easy to be the guy that's really orchestrating everything. So it's better if it comes from a center back or a center midfielder. And certainly when you talk about Tyler, his combination of urgency and ease in the match was perfect, right? When he came in, I don't think he lost any passes. I don't think he had any wasted movements. I thought everything he did was so clear and so easy. And then his ability to tell guys, get up the field, come on, go and counter press there, be ready to go, next play, let's go. I mean, this was fun to watch for me specifically. I mean, I you know how much I love Tyler, but this was a real injection of understanding what the game required at that moment to find a way to get the result.
Tyler Adams is belief, but it's still an agony for 95 minutes. And Greg said post-game, you've referenced this, he said, you can see this team hasn't played together for 4 months. That's pretty clear. And I'm going to be candid, I wrote about this morning in our newsletter. I found that to be a perplexing comment because that's the very nature of international football and the core of its difference to the club game. These squads, international squads, are always going to be fleeting creatures. Players flying in for more points, training maybe as little as once, twice, 3 times together, and then taking the field to represent their nation. International managers realise that they've got to find a system that fits the strengths of their best players as quickly as possible. You've already talked about this. I really believe a simple game plan as opposed to club tactics, which can be complicated, which can be nuanced, subtle, because the players bloody train together for weeks and weeks before their season even begins. You said, quote, that when you watch this team, sometimes we're trying to be Spain 2010 and we do not have the players. How would you get your head around trying to build the best system around the players that we do have?
Yeah, I think that there's a way to do some of the possession tactics that we try to employ, but to make it a little bit more simple. To have some kind of to maintain a simple structure, and then to have some movements and combinations that can unbalance the opponent. And again, sometimes even as a tactical coach, I watch how we play, and I'm questioning, okay, do we want that from that player at that moment, or do we want something different, or how does it all fit together? Now, I don't want to listen. Greg's become a little bit sensitive of things that I say, and so I don't want to be overly critical of Greg. And I want to make it clear, Roger, I don't want his job. Okay, so that's not part of any of thing that I'm doing. I'm just trying to always look at it for what it is and what I think and what I see.
Greg, if you're listening, I do want your job, but keep going, Jesse.
But like if I then go and look at Jamaica last night, and I look at Panama, and I look at Mexico, I thought that all 3 of those teams had a pretty simple way of trying to be what they wanted to be, And then, of course, on the day, it's can you execute that more than what the opponent can? And I thought the Panama Mexico game was actually really interesting for the different tactical things that both teams were trying to achieve. And so, in the end, when you watch specifically international football, okay, when you watch club football, you can watch Pep's tactics and you can watch the way he play and go, wow. Like how sophisticated every little movement is choreographed, and the discipline for the players to understand their roles and then play within their roles in a way that exposes and accesses their true talents is at the highest level of any team in the world, which makes it amazing to watch, right? But at the international level, it's about how simple can you make the structure so that the players understand and can execute as easily as possible, and how does it fit with the qualities of the players that you have, right? And that's a little bit different. Pep can go out and sign and buy whatever players he wants to fit exactly what he's trying to build, literally whatever players he wants. And with the national team, it's different. So again, this is not a criticism of Greg Berhalter. This is just stating the obvious of what you're trying to achieve when you have a national team.
95 minutes and 24 seconds on new set-piece coach doing work, coaxing the own goal. Then the game became about two great Americans, less serenade, two heroic cameos which coated the agony with a layer of honey feel-good sweetness. Gio Reyna and Hadji Wright, my lord. I'll just say, watching Gio Reyna charge forward, skip one way, slip a disguise past the other as if he was the professor from the AND1 mixtape tour. The second pass, second assist, might have been even better. Jesse, what did Gio do that the rest of the United States team could not in regulation?
Well, I think he has something different than the other players, right? He has this ease and real elegance to being able to put specifically these final passes and final plays together. So I thought he was really fun to watch. And it was clear at halftime that if he wasn't coming in at half, it was going to happen shortly after. And it was just a matter of what was his fitness level and how quickly could you get him on the pitch to make it feel like he would be effective. But I think the decision to put him in at halftime was absolutely the right decision. And then I thought immediately he had a couple other passes in there that could have led to goals before the two assists. And it's just the ease I always like players like him to want to be in and around areas that'll make a difference and not on areas like off the back line, out wide, where other players that aren't as gifted and special can make plays that are perfectly acceptable within what you're trying to achieve. And what you saw from Gio last night is the real desire to get balls in difficult positions and then make a difference by how he could make a little connection with players in front of him. And like I said, he needed players who wanted to run behind, and I think that Hadji Wright really provided that for him. So, I don't like. It's always like we all like Gio, right? We all want Gio to be at his best, and he seems like a nice kid, right? He seemed like when I've talked to people, I don't know him well at all. I've met him a couple times, but I don't know him. But when I've talked to people at Dortmund about him, when I've talked to people that know him on the national team, they all like him, and everybody wants him to be successful. And it's just trying to figure out, I think in general, what's the right spot for him in Europe, how he can really get his career going in a way that represents the talent that we all think he has. So it's nice. It's really nice to see him come on the pitch last night and reward himself and play with a smile on his face. And they interviewed him after the game, and I thought he looked really happy, which it's probably not been the easiest year for him. So it was good to see that, because you want to see young players just enjoying their football.
God, I am so happy for Gio. Got to be candid. Are you watching Nottingham Forest? That kid, and he is still a kid, 21 years of age, so much career, please God, still to come. But after all he's been through with that World Cup trauma, which must have been an agony, a bewildering agony, a chaos, deeply, profoundly personal as well as professional, and that subsequent tailspin down the Forest depth chart, to step up and to bail out the United States, to save Greg Berhalter in many ways. I mean, that is just football at Greek epic drama level narrative. I'm also elated for Hadji Wright, a player who took a lot of crap after the World Cup. It almost became a scapegoat. He was perceived to have taken Pepe's spot at the World Cup. That chaos, no fault of his own. Also, no fault of his own that the US couldn't conjure goals. He has tenaciously risen at Coventry, their top scorer on the season, an aspiring Premier League race for Coventry. Dude only
an FA Cup semi-final.
Yeah, I mean, what a week. We talk about best weeks ever, Jesse.
Yeah.
Hadji Wright's best week ever is the Stuff Cup for Dreams. Dude only does buzzer beaters. I mean, what must he be feeling right now? As you're saying, FA Cup last weekend, 90 minutes plus 10. That poem of a goal that took his club to Wembley, and now he's done the same for his nation in our hour of need. And it was honestly magnificent to witness. Jesse, what do you see when you watch Hadji?
It's funny. We talked about the semi-final match or the quarterfinal match against Wolves on the podcast. And I said I was really happy for Hadji and obviously a big moment for him. But the one criticism I had of him on the day was that he was playing as the left winger. He was standing on the touchline too much and not running behind, not playing vertical enough, not looking to get into dangerous positions. And then you look at last night and he does the exact opposite and rewards himself. And my comment about that was you always want big, strong, fast attacking players to look like that. You don't want the power that certain players have, and you don't want them to look like they don't have that, or they're slow-footed, or they're not quick on the turn. You want your athletic players to look athletic, and certainly Hadji Wright did that last night. And so, in general, I remember the first time I saw Tyler Adams was way back in Bradenton in 2015, and on that team they had Pulisic, and Hadji Wright was the striker.
They love Hadji. Tyler and Pulisic love Hadji.
Yeah, and listen, when I saw him in that match, I knew how the hype was around Pulisic, and he was a really good player on the day. Tyler stuck out as the real leader on the youngest player on that U17 group, and then Hadji Wright looked like actually among that team. Looked like the biggest talent, and a player that could really develop into something that could be a real striker for us for years to come. And sometimes players need, some challenges. They need to find, and then in the end, they need to find the right spot. They need to find somewhere where people believe in them, where they feel like they're connected with the type of football that's being played. And what's interesting is for Hadji Wright, he's kind of become more of a winger than a striker, and so. I think if he can continue to have the flexibility to play along all the different spots on the front line and continue to use this idea of being vertical and being aggressive and using not just his quality, his technical ability, but also his power and speed and size to reward himself, then we could have a real player on our hands.
Against Mexico, they've got to start, right? Gio and Hadji.
I think that to start both of them might be a little bit of a challenge, because I would think that you would still go back to Balogun, Pulisic, and Weah. It would depend a little bit on how those three come out of the match. And, let's also be very clear. The Mexico game will be very different than the Jamaica game. It will require a different set of tactics and ideas as to what you want to achieve within the structure of what the team is. So I would guess that Gio has to start based on the way that he really impacted the game. And then I think you could still be making an argument that Hadji off the bench is a really good way to have a strategy for what that game is. Now, I can fully understand. I'm sure that the staff, there will be a very in-depth discussion about what the tactics should be, what the player selection should be, and how they should start against Mexico. But I always think it's important, and this is what it proved last night, is you have to really build a culture within your team that it's not just about who the starting 11 is. It's about the players off the bench, that they're ready to make a big impact. And especially given the modern age of having 5 subs, you need 16 players on the day that are ready to perform at their highest level. And the more that you can convince a team and wrap their minds around what the collective is, and then execute that and make sure that you're always getting stronger from the bench, you're just always going to give yourself a better chance to succeed. So that has to be a strength of this group of players now, is not just who the best player is, who the leader is, who the best 11 is, but now the overall collective and what they can achieve together.
Yeah, my friend Jonas Eidval, the Arsenal women's manager, came on a lot during the Women's World Cup, and he said international level, who the starting 11 is not the most important job for a coach to think about. It's who your closing 11 is. That's what makes the international manager truly great. Couple of quick ones before we close. I've got to ask you this. Was Greg Berhalter talking about you when he not so subtly said, I think I heard somewhere that someone asked, why did Gio get called into camp? Jesse, when you hear that, are you like, this is an odd time and an odd way to take a victory lap? Or are you just psyched that he's listening to your podcast?
Well, first of all, we never said don't bring Gio into camp. We were just having a discussion about what it means for players in Europe if they're not playing. Right, I think it was 38 minutes that Gio's played for Nottingham Forest. But if you went back and looked at locks that we had for the roster that all three of us had picked, Gio was on that list. So none of us were making a case for not bringing him in. We were just talking about what are the factors and how do you make decisions on when you only have a 23-man roster and you've got a lot of players performing at a high level. How do you choose who comes, who doesn't, and what does it mean to the overall group of what you need to be successal in any international window?
So what you're saying
but
is,
I mean,
Greg, if you're listening, rate, subscribe, and comment on your podcast.
Well, in general, what I would say is, like, especially after a game like that, I found it a little bit interesting that this is what was on his mind, right? Like, and by the way, nobody can understand media scrutiny probably as an American coach more than maybe Bob Bradley and myself, okay? And you better have thick skin and you better be ready to take criticism. And by the way, I don't think we've been critical at all. I think we've been really supportive. We like to see the players do well in Europe. We like to see the American team do well. Our job is to analyze what's happening. And if I'm going to do this, listen, I don't think I'm great at media, okay, Roger, but I'm trying to do my best. And if I'm going to do it, I'm going to actually try to give a little bit of insight as to the way that I see things and what my thoughts are and opinions on what's happening with players and with teams and everything else. So, and I don't, by the way, I don't claim to always be right. And this is one of the things I love about football and having a coaching staff is having real dialogue in a coaching staff about what's happening in our team. What do the opponents look like? How can we improve? What does training need to look like every day? What players do we need to check in with? How do we present video? What things do we emphasize? This is what being a manager is being very analytical and looking at things carefully.
Question from a listener, Greg B, 25. What changes, Jesse, would you make ahead of the Sunday clash with Mexico?
Yeah, I mean, does Tim Ream come in? I think it's pretty clear that Gio comes in. I don't think that Tyler would have been given the okay to give 60 minutes, but maybe he has been. I still, as I'm watching, I was maybe one person last night to see that Greg made the decision to take Tyler off because the last thing I want is for him to get injured after everything he's been through in the last year. Yeah. And I think we all know how important he is for the national team. Serginho Dest, I think, is a pretty obvious one to come back in. And you can see now that even the situation with Serginho in Trinidad, that if Serginho's in this game as well against Jamaica, he's one of the guys that can break things down. And we missed him. We missed him last night for sure. And then, I think, there'll be a number of different discussions, but I wouldn't over-index too much performances last night, and I would try to now continue to invest in the team and in the players that you think are going to be most vital moving forward.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, on Sunday night, we faced Mexico, who beat Panama 3-0. If you were the United States manager, after we'd looked death in the face against Jamaica and barely whispered, not today, what would your message be to these players on Sunday night?
It's going to be a different kind of game. It's going to require a different kind of performance, and that we need to learn from some of the things that we didn't do as effectively as we wanted to. But in the end, we need to physically recharge. We'll develop a good game plan, right? We'll understand exactly what Mexico is. We should feel that we've had great success against them in the last years. It's a different team, though, for me. Mexico is a better team than they've been in recent years. But in the end, we have to just recharge ourselves physically, mentally, develop a clear tactical plan, and then make sure that when we come Sunday that we're ready to go after, a big match and make sure that we're ready to perform and get the win.
Can we get a score prediction, Jesse? Spoiler alert, listeners.
I think the U.S. will win. I think the U.S. will win, and I'll go with 2-0. I think that this game actually sets up for us to be a little bit more successful in the things that we want to do, but it'll still challenge the things that it'll make us defend a little bit more, and it'll make us have to deal with some of the things that Mexico will bring at us.
What does it mean winning a third Nations League? I mean, is it just like the Copa America now? That really is our everything.
No. I mean, I'm one. Listen, the national team in general has to take whatever's given to them, and they have to try to perform and then win. But these aren't this whole Nations League thing. I don't like. I don't. And the reason I don't like it is because it doesn't give our national team the real opportunity to play against better opponents, more European opponents, more South American opponents. But what it does put a big emphasis on is Copa America, right? It does mean that Copa America has to be a big emphasis within the team to be ready to be at our best. So, yeah, that's what I think everyone's looking forward to in the short term.
God willing, last question for you, Jesse. Can you believe you're the last person to beat Jurgen Klopp at Anfield? I did mention this in the introduction. I am fascinated. You most probably will be the last human being in human civilization to beat Jurgen Klopp at Anfield. Somerville's glorious 89th minute winner, of which I have a back tattoo, gave you a magnificent 2-1 win back in October 2022. I think there's just 5 more home league, Premier League games for Jurgen as Liverpool manager. Tell us the secret for the other 5 managers who are probably listening to this podcast with G. Berhalter 25. Tell us the secret. What does it take to beat Liverpool at Anfield?
Luck. Luck. On that day, we tried to be organized and have a very specific pressing and count and then attacking transition match plan. And we in that sense we were pretty effective on the day. With the ball, when you go to Anfield, that this is one of the things they're really good at, right? Is they're really good at pressing you and making things difficult. And if you're going to talk about Jurgen, I think, we're not totally similar on exactly the way we think and try to play the game, but there are a lot of similarities. And he's German, and a lot of my sort of, I think, education is about some of the German system and tactics. But in the end, we had a good performance, no question. We just gave ourselves a chance in the match to be around. And when you're playing the best opponents, that's all you're looking for, is just to give yourself a chance. And in the end, we were able to make a couple of plays, and our goalkeeper had a good day, and we were able to get a win. So,
do you remember what Jurgen said to you at full time?
No, I don't know that we said too much. I remember more. We had some good discussions after the Salzburg game, where we were down 3 and then came back and then lost 4-3. And this is not a knock on Jurgen, but I always find that the best coaches are obviously a lot more friendly when they're put to test, but they find a way to win, right? Versus when they're put to test and then they lose, they don't have the need and desire to talk quite as much. Which is, I understand. I'm the same way.
I thought you were going to tell me, whispered into your ear, you, Jesse Marsch, will be the last. You will be
Well, you get a lot more compliments about how your team plays. Like Arsenal, when we lost 1-0 at Anfield or at Ellen Road, Arsenal was very complimentary. And I've been on that end of things too often, where you play against a good opponent and you're really close and you come up short. And then, of course, the opposing team has a lot to say about how great you are. But when they lose, it's not quite the same.
Oh, Jesse, I've got to say, it's been joyful to catch up with you. You're a beautiful bloke. Jesse's podcast, Call It What You Want, is available wherever you get your podcast. He will be also broadcasting the final. God, USA-Mexico. He's already told us the score. It's going to be 2-0, 9:15 p.m. Eastern Time. It will be broadcast on Paramount Plus live. I'll be live on Men in Blazers YouTube after that one with the great Brendan Hunt, Coach Beard of Ted Lasso fame, beautiful human being. Come and join us and ask your questions. But for now, Jesse Marsch, you are the single greatest. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Talk soon, buddy.